Hello, and welcome to Let's Make a Top-Down Shooter. This video is about character death and respawning. And a special thanks to all my supporters. Your support is what makes this worth doing. Alright, so what we have seen is that when we switch to a new map, player state and the character are removed and recreated. However, when the character dies, we're going to destroy it and call restart player, which will create a new character, but not a new player state. This causes a number of conflicts and errors for two main reasons. The first is that this design didn't really take respawn into account, and the second is that restart player results in BeginPlay being called before our init ability system component, whereas the code expects it to be called after, as it was with a new character. So we're going to be updating character and player state for this. We're going to rename the clear given abilities to clear default abilities and add remove default effects. This also means I need an array of effects here. And then I'm also going to throw in init final and on init finished. On init finished is just the blueprint version that's being called at the end of init final when that's successful. In our begin play, we do not want any of the ASC or player state related stuff because it's not guaranteed to be there. And our spawning weapon also needs to be moved. So instead, we're going to set our is begin play called to true and call init final. In end play, we're going to add our clear default abilities and remove default effects. In our init ability system component, same as in begin play, we're going to set the other boolean is init ASC called equals true and call init final. In initialize effects, just like up here, we need to add, well, we effectively need to add given effects.add with GE handle. However, when a GE is applied in its instant, there is no need to add it to that because removing it later would have no effect. So instead, we're going to get our gameplay effect from the effect class that was supplied and check to make sure the duration policy is not instant, in which case we'll add it to that list. This was renamed to clear default abilities. And our remove default effects, very similar. Just make sure the ability system component is valid and relate a right through that array and remove active gameplay effect. Lastly, our init final, which I'll just throw up here. So if either begin play or this function init ability system component has not been called, we just return. So it's basically just making sure init final is calling only after both those functions have been called. And this is just the same setup we had earlier. Lastly, it's calling the blueprint function, so we can also change how begin play was calling stuff. In our player state, since we want to have some abilities and effects which are maintained and others that are only for the character, we're adding begin play and initialize abilities and effects, very, very similar to the character version. So the constructor and GetAbilitySystemComponent remain the same. Begin play is just calling and initialize effects and abilities. And just like in the character, it's just iterating through that list. giving the ability or applying a gameplay effect to spec. So to test this out initially, I'm going to go into our event graph, find the open space, just going to temporarily put in IA jump. So when IA jump is pressed, we're just going to test code this. We're going to call destroy actor. So destroy actor is going to result in destroyed being called. So we'll throw that down here. And for that, we want to get the game mode. We don't need to cast it because this is built into game mode base. We're going to restart player. Now the problem here is we have a player controller and then we call destroy actor. By the time it gets here, get controller is no longer valid. So instead, we're going to use up here, we're going to promote that to a value. I'm going to call that controller ref. And then I'm going to drag it into the wrong spot. So now we're setting our controller when destroy is called. And then we can just get it back when the destroyed event happens. If you leave that bit out, or if you basically drag this down here, you won't be possessed by the controller, and it will be bad. So without the init final, if I run this as it is now, it would cause a number of conflicts. One of them is that update bars is being called here. Because of the shield regen, it's being called basically once a second, I believe. That would call this. This would try to get the WPP health set and call something on it. The order would have been such that update bars gets called before we actually get to save our WPP health set. So even though some bits are working, I'm going to change this. We have our on init finished. That's where I want to be initializing all of this stuff. So init UI only gets called after the AC is ready, which is important because in our weapon set, we're sending along the ASC. This would be null if that wasn't set up initially. And similarly, we have an issue with upgrades. So if I go in here right now, I hit play, I pop up the UI here, got move speed, got some nice move speed. If I hit space to respawn myself, I do still have the move speed. But you can see that it's here twice. If I hit space again, it gets duplicated again. So the reason this is because when we're switching maps earlier, all this was getting reset. But since we're respawning and this is being applied to the ability system component, which is attached to the player state, it remains. So to get around that duplication, we need to update all of our effects, all of our upgrade effects rather. So for all 4 of these, I'm going just to add a component of type asset tags gameplay component. If you hover over that, it'll say that it's, oh, not that. Here, these are tags that the gameplay effect itself owns. So it doesn't transfer to actors or anything. Didn't mean to click that. So if I just throw added on here and I just want our upgrade. So for each of our GEs, I'll just do that. close that so it's not a pain in the way. Component, add asset tags. Now with that set up, I go back into the third person character. In our award upgrades rather, before I do all that stuff, I can get our ability system component. I can call remove active gameplay active effects rather, with source tags. So here we just set the upgrade. We want this called before we apply all the other ones. So there's a cute little thing. I've got all this overlapped here. I have those selected. If I want to basically inverse the selection, I can hold Control and grab everything. And now I can move these over. All right, so with that set, if I go in, I do an upgrade. Hey, super move speed. You can see that's on there. I hit space. It didn't add a second one. Incidentally, you can see that our weapon's being dropped every time we die. There is an issue that won't be resolved in this video, which if you respawn on the same spot, it can cause some problems. As you can see here, it doesn't have the arrow in ASC because of the conflict of the timing between interacting with a weapon when it's spawned and you're also trying to equip it, but also unequipping it because you're standing on the other one. All right, so the other thing was because I added the default abilities and effects to the player state, I can go in here and look at my default. So our weapon reload, that's something that's effectively global. It'll be on this character, every character, etc. That doesn't need to be here, so that goes on the player state. So we'll open that up as well. Similarly, we have our default attributes, which every time we spawn, we're going to update this, but this is used to reset our attributes to, well, default. However, we do not want multiple copies of shield regen, so we can just remove that with this. Add it to the player state so it's only applied the one time. And as I just said, default attributes. If you go in here, we want all of these things as override. I don't recall if it's just that I forgot these or if I had a reason to do this, but these should both be override. Otherwise, every time you respawn, the shield regen value of 5 would just be added every single time. So you just regen faster and faster. Lastly, our max health upgrade was the only one that was instant, because we are now overriding max health when we respawn. I'll show you here actually the flow. Oh right, I'm not going to get it because I need my game instance. Need to change the weights. All right, so let's say this one. Want to make sure that we get some epic health upgrades. Pop that up. I have 120 health. If I go and respawn, I'm back to 100 health because it's overriding the base. And because this is instant, it's adding to the base and then just getting overwritten. So instead we make this infinite like we did with the others. Secondly, we can find some other way to do this, but we do not want to have an instant effect that adds to the health, or an infinite effect that adds to the health. So this one we'll just delete. Go back in here. You can see our max health goes up to 120. You can see that it's now up here because it's an infinite effect. When I hit space, it's still there. It's still 120. Health stays at 100. As you can see down here as well. Lastly, we want to do actual player death. So in our event graph, we'll move around the logic for this a bit. So when our shield changes, we'll just continue calling update bars. When our health is changing, we have a few things. First of all, death effectively means when your health is less than or equal to 0. Drag that out, hit B for a branch. The problem is this gets called initially and both values are 0. So we want to also check to make sure that our old value is greater than 0. And then we can throw an AND Boolean. When that's not the case, we just update the bars. When it is, we want to do the same logic that we have temporarily down here. Just copy that, put it up here. So to test that, we need to go ask our friendly enemies. Hello. And when your health gets to 0, it resets or respawns again. And similarly, there was didn't actually have anything picked, but we could do that. I mean, it's respawning the same way, so there's no reason why it wouldn't be the same. And respawn with 2 max health upgrades. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video and would like to see more, you know what to do. And if you would like to support this channel, or you just want to download the project files, you can do so through my Patreon linked below.